Hello, Matt. How are you?
Give me a second to unmute. There we go. Here we go.
This is my first meeting today. I was off yesterday, and like everything's always so jacked up after. I don't know why. Like every time I have to run Zoom on a Monday, it's just broken. I love it.
Yep.
Although it's still better than Teams. Monday mornings I have a Teams meeting for the Vex group, and like it's like God damn it, every time something ridiculous is broken.
Yeah, Zoom was outlawed for a period of time at IBM, but they had to relent. So it's back on the supported list.
Interesting. So like outlawed as you couldn't join a Zoom meeting?
Yeah. Well, yeah, IBM's got a corporate WebEx account, and that's what they want you to use. But that's not always possible. So
Sure.
So it's in like our catalog of supported apps for a while, then was taken out and was added back.
Interesting. That doesn't surprise me.
Well, I mean, I experienced during COVID, the Zoom bomb.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because the meeting IDs were what, like 5 or 6 characters, something hilariously small, with no passwords.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, it was surreal. Like hundreds of people joined within seconds, then people were playing music and saying things that were not safe for work. So I had to kill it immediately,
Yeah, I remember that. Holy cow. Man, that feels like it was 100 years ago.
I know.
Wow.
We want to all mentally put all that COVID stuff in our rearview mirror,
I know, man. Holy cow. Holy cow. So we got 5 minutes before the meeting starts. Thank you all for being early joiners. We'll just hang out and do nothing for a few minutes. All right, to avoid embarrassment when we have a larger group, is it Facila? Is that how I pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, excellent. I'm usually wrong on these things, so I'm very pleased with myself today. And I think I'm good with you, Max, so I'll not ask how to pronounce your name correctly.
Max is fine. Yeah. Combustion. But it's like notoriously difficult for English speakers to actually pronounce this.
Combustion doesn't seem too bad. I know I worked with a guy from Hungary at one point, and I was like, how do I pronounce your last name? He's like, just don't. Like, no.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, I guarantee you can't do it, so we're not even gonna try. So it's like, oh man, like never felt like a bigger moron as an American.
Yeah. I actually have an uncle who lives in New York. He's been living there since the 80s. And I never asked him how he actually teaches people how to pronounce his last name.
He probably gave up. That's what usually happens to people.
Yeah.
I remember I had a coworker I worked with when I was at Red Hat. He was from Brazil, so it's Portuguese, obviously, and his name was Ramon, which is pronounced Ramon in Portuguese. And he moved to San Francisco, and I went out for lunch with him and some of his coworkers, and they were calling him Ramon, and I'm like, what the hell? He's like, I gave up. Like, I'm Ramon now.
Yeah.
I felt bad.
I once met a French Canadian when I was in San Francisco that hired me to go work in LA with him at his company, and it was really funny because everybody called him Chris, but he was very clearly French Canadian. And so I said, Christophe? And he says, yes, but nobody calls me that here. And I said, okay, well, is it okay if I call you Christophe? He said, sure, that'd be great. I got to the site and they said, Chris will be here soon. I'm like, who's Chris?
Nice. Oh,
I hadn't made the connection. It was really funny. So
nice. It's funny, but it's sad.
Well, I'm in Canada, so French names, depending on your background, are normal. By the way, I'm Bien from the Linux Foundation,
Oh, very nice.
and you
What-
didn't have to try and butcher my name, so that's good.
That's not yet. Good time.
Makes it easier.
And whereabouts in Canada are you?
I'm on Vancouver Island in Victoria, so West Coast.
nice.
Yeah.
We were just out your way a couple weeks ago.
I just love that people have heard from where I'm from, because that's not normal if it's not Toronto.
Everyone knows Vancouver. I mean, come on.
Yeah, Vancouver Island. I'm on the island, the southern tip of the island off the coast. But yes,
I've never been. I've heard it's just a magical place.
This is a gray day, but this is a beach near where I live.
This is my window, right? Like,
no, not quite.
yeah. See, you say that, but I've heard in the winter it does get a little toasty or a little chilly up there.
It's around freezing. Yeah, we still have flowers all year round. Yeah.
Oh wow.
We had snow for 4 days this year, which we were not happy with. So it's like Seattle, or very similar to Seattle. A little bit less rain.
Gotcha. All right, we can get cracking. It's 5 after. I don't think it'll be a huge crowd today, just because it was the holiday yesterday in the US. All right, so I will paste the first link in the notes. If everyone could sign in here. We do this weird for anyone who's just joining, because this is technically the tools working group, but there's no tools meetings because we don't really have a lot to talk about. So I've hijacked it for the SBOM Everywhere working group. So sign in on the tools meeting for me. And then the SBOM Everywhere agenda is in the second doc I'll paste. And the first agenda item is I ask everyone to just put their intro in the chat rather than going around the room, because that often takes too long. So I'll start. And thank you for coming. We've got a pretty packed agenda today, so I'm very excited. And we'll just get moving right away. We'll start with, we have 2 guests who are here to discuss how they're using SBOMs like in the open source universe. And the first is Fasila. So Fasila, I will let you take it away and tell us all about what you're doing with SBOMs.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yep, we hear you.
Yep.
Yes, so my name is Fasila. So I currently work in the open source project called Istio. So Istio has been currently joining the CNCF Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and then we had certain works ongoing on the supply chain security area. So Georg Kunz, who is in this meeting, he is my colleague in Ericsson. So he knew about our journey with Istio and SBOM. So he told like it would be nice to share this experience with the wider audience so that they can also understand how we are using it and how we decided to incorporate SBOM to Istio. And
Fasila, can I interrupt for one moment? Will you explain to everyone what Istio is? Because I have a suspicion not everyone understands what it does.
Okay, so Istio is a service mesh solution. So basically, we provide security, traffic management, related operations, majorly for the Kubernetes platforms. And of course, not just Kubernetes, there are other things as well, but yeah, we majorly use it with Kubernetes. So yeah, supply chain security is anyways an interesting topic for almost all the cloud native projects. There are, and in CNCF itself, there is a lot of push across the projects mentioning like, okay, you should do whatever possible to enhance your supply chain security posture. So we were also thinking what and all we can do for this. So Kubernetes by itself adopted some of these SBOM functionalities. So Kubernetes came up with a BOM utility within the Kubernetes SIG release community. So they had written their own bill of materials utility where the Golang projects can just use it and generate your bill of materials. So that is when we also, because Istio is also majorly a Golang project currently, so it became easy for us to use this particular utility and generate our bill of materials. And we were anyways in touch with the Kubernetes community for many of our other release related operations. So that's how it started. Initially, we thought of using the SPDX had another utility to generate bill of materials. That's what the plan was. And then exactly at the same time, we came to know that Kubernetes has this BOM utility, which looks easier to use, and we were easily getting support from them. So we decided to go ahead with this particular BOM utility. So at this time, I was also new to Istio. I had also recently relocated to Germany, joining Ericsson. So since it was a new experience for me, the first thing I had to do was to write an RFC document to the Istio community and present, okay, this is something which you would like to have in your project. So what happens with all these non-functional requirements usually is that everybody wants to do it and everybody wants to have it in their project so that they can say, okay, we have done all these salsa level 1, level 2, etc. But nobody has enough time to invest on such things. So, but since I was new and I had some of my previous colleagues or friends who were working in different supply chain security related domains in the open source area, I was in constant touch with them. And that's how I came to know about the utility, about BOM and other BOM related works. So I proposed this as an RFC. Maybe I can share my screen and then.
Please, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so we started with this document. It's not a big thing, but yeah, this is how in Istio usually any new feature request comes in. So we write a small document describing the background requirements and then how it can be done and what are the options in which this can be achieved. Yeah, so this is how it started with. So we initially started with this SPDX SBOM generator tool, which was readily available at that time. And then we enhanced it saying, okay, there is something called a BOM utility in K8s SIG community as well. And similarly, we had the Cyclone DX tools as well. Most of them are doing similar things. And yeah, it was just a matter of writing a very small script to get it done for Istio because the whole project was Golang, and we generate two separate SBOMs, one for the release artifacts and one for the source code. Yeah, so this is my PR for that. If you see, it did not take much effort. The BOM utility was also very straightforward to use. Of course, when it was used outside Kubernetes, we had hit some minor issues here and there, but we got immediate feedback from the Kubernetes community, and then they were open to fix the issues for us. Yeah, so it just got, it was just one file and like 60 to 70 lines of code, and it was done. And if you see the Istio release page, you can see that with each release, we publish the source and release SPDX files for every release. Yeah, that's pretty much about that. And of course, when we started publishing the SBOM in SPDX format, we were contacted by the Cyclone DX folks as well, asking like, yeah, we should publish both the formats. Yeah, we have not yet done it. As of now, Kubernetes is also publishing only SPDX format, I think. So we have just done it this way, but of course we are open to do any other formats, whatever is needed. So we have done this as the first step, and then I don't know whether you know Adolfo, who is the Kubernetes release manager, and he has been doing a lot of work around all the supply chain security related tasks, and he's from Chain God, like a company called Chain God. So they had to come up with a checklist for the SALSA compliance, like level 1, level 2, like that. And if you go through it, we can see like where your project stands as of now, whether you're at level 1 compliant, level 2, like that. So when we did that analysis, we understood that as BOM comes only at the level 2, we had some other tasks to finish for level 1. Basically the build attestation. So we are currently now trying to check how to do something like in toto attestation or anything else that is possible to first comply to the level 1 checklist. Yeah, that's all I had to share.
So I have one quick question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Your SPDX files, are you signing those? If so, what keys are you using?
So it's the SPD, so all the artifacts here we have cosine related signing methodologies. I don't have the exact details about it, but yeah, the release manager does that.
Okay, I figured you were, but I wanted to make sure. Trying to make sure people are actually signing their SBOMs.
Yeah.
So Vasil, I do have one quick question. Do you know, does the BOM tool output Cyclone DX or does it only output SPDX?
It only outputs SPDX.
Okay.
Whenever we started using it, it had only SPDX. As far as I know, it has not been improved to have Cyclone DX.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, that's all. I'm not going to ask anything else. I'll let George has his hand up. I'll let him ask a question.
Yeah, thanks. Just wondering, how stable has this been for you over the time? I think you've been implementing this half a year ago or about a year ago.
Yeah,
so how quickly does this, how stable is it? How quickly does it break? Because I got the question the other day from a colleague asking, so if we're going to have an effort like the one we're discussing here, of kind of being kind to projects and implementing these things there, how hard is it to implement? Because we're adding maintenance burdens on projects. So I'm wondering how well that worked for you.
Okay, so for us, I have never had any case where somebody reported that, okay, the BOM utility now is broken, please fix it so that we can release. That never happened. Maybe because Kubernetes releases stable versions of BOM only after they are internally trying it out, because they are also using the same code to generate their SPDX files, right? So maybe things are stable and working fine before they ship a new version, and then we also take a little bit of time before upgrading our BOM utility version.
Okay.
So we did not have, so far, no case where things were broken, but we do keep updating our BOM version. It's not like we are just using that old version where things were working, but we do upgrade.
Okay, thanks.
But I think there are more things to do. Like if you see that SALSA checklist, it's like really big. There are several things which we have to do so that we can be level 1 compliant itself. I think Kubernetes has achieved level 2 or level 3 compliance. Yeah, Istio is not there yet.
Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for presenting this. This has been really helpful context for me, and I'm really pleased to see that Istio is doing this so successfully. My question is, have you heard from any of the consumers of your BOMs? Do you have people that or companies or downstream projects that you're aware of that are using your BOMs, and any context on their experience?
Okay, we do. In the upstream, we do get issues now and then, saying they would like to have the files generated in specific context. And we do get enhancement requests for different mode of operations. Like, for example, here the Docker images are all published as part of the release, and then we use those published Docker images to generate the SPDX. There were people who were asking, like, they want a mechanism to generate the SPDX file for Docker images which are in the local repository. So similar requests do come. So I think there are people who are using it. But internally, for Ericsson, I think I did present this, and then we are exploring on how to leverage on this downstream. But they do see a benefit in using this because it has a lot of things automated, which currently we are doing with a lot of manual effort, using manual scanning, and a lot of repeated effort goes away with this automated way of generating SPDX files. They do agree that.
I kind of have a follow-up to that. So how often does this require like care and feeding? I know you set up all the automation, and is it pretty much good to go now?
Yeah, that's it. So we have already done it. We did it like in STO 1.14 release. So once done, afterwards, we never had to do anything additional except for upgrading the utility version to the latest version, so that but otherwise the generation part is the same code. I have not even touched that for the last 4 releases. So if you see that, it's 1.18 release now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear, because that's my biggest fear on all this, is that you're going to have to like fiddle every freaking release, and no one wants to do that. So
it's like the BOM utility is pretty much easy to use, but the only thing is it can be used only for Golang code, because Kubernetes is Golang, and then they have no plans to support any other languages. So with Istio, we have one module which is in C++, for which we are not yet generating the SPDX files. And for C++,
Gotcha.
we have not seen any good BOM utility so far. So yes, for many languages, the support is not there. So that is one shortcoming.
I have another question. You mentioned that you're working on SALSA compliance. I was curious if you have run the security scorecard on your project, and if so, what that experience is like. I know that's a little bit different of a question from SBOM, but I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective, and it's another working group I'm in. So, and one of the things that group is talking about is how to see if the projects have produced an SBOM. So there may be a connection at some point down the road.
Okay, we were not aware of the security scorecard utility. What we did is we were manually going through a checklist and checking one by one. The checklist had questions like whether your project has PRs approved by 2 people or just 1 person, whether you generate build attestation, whether the dependencies are clearly defined, like that, a lot of questions. And then we were just ticking the boxes and seeing where we are. We never ran any tool.
And so the checklist was the SALSA compliance checklist, yes. Right? Okay. Yes. Thank you.
That's unfortunate. I've been bullying some other projects that we are involved in to run scorecards, but not Istio, because Vasila has been taking good care of this. But we should run it, Vasila, and see what comes out.
Yeah, if it is there, we would. Yeah, so if you see this, I just created this particular issue in Istio to track this, and then we just had this one checklist, which is like this, and then we were trying to tick one by one and then see where we are. So if there is a tool which we can run, that would definitely help us. But I know that ChainGuard, the company called ChainGuard, they are working on something similar where you can run it against your project, and it will tell you whether you are level 1 compliant or not. But of course, it's a different company and a different project. if you have something open source, we would definitely love to try that out.
I'm gonna move us along, but I guess the one thing I would add is this is the old salsa checklist, and there's a new version now. So not to kind of ruin your party, but
It's okay. Maybe I'll talk to Georg and get the latest one and then update our issue.
everything change is the only constant, right?
Okay.
All right. So I'll keep us moving then. Thank you so much, Vasila. This was awesome. Like, well done. And well done on the work. Like, that's a huge deal that Istio is generating SBOMs. That's really, really cool.
Thank you.
All right. So we also have Max from Sneak to have a chat with us. Max, Vasila and Shade. Max, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just quick intro about myself. I'm Max. I work at Sneak in the open source group. So if you know Sneak and our product line, a lot about is actually scanning your open source projects or your software projects, which are built on open source components for vulnerabilities. And we have actually had an internal representation of an SBOM at Sneak for a really long time. Similar to how Anchor is doing it with SIFT. I think there's also a proprietary serialization format that can be translated to CycloneDX or SPDX. And we are not really making that internal representation so public, even though there is a public repository with the schema and everything. And so far what we have done mostly was to let our customers generate SBOMs off of this internal representation, which is fittingly called a depth graph. So no real magic there. And I have been mostly working on the translation of this internal representation. So how our software works is that we do a composition analysis of a software project, turn that into this depth graph, and then translate that into CycloneDX and SPDX. And this is so basically what we're doing. We're offering SBOM generation. We are currently also working on SBOM ingestion, so trying to understand what are the different components that you have in an SBOM that you bring to Sneak, and then we can analyze that for vulnerabilities. There's also other competitors who already offer this. And also something we have actually open sourced just recently is a tool that takes an SBOM and can enrich that with additional information. So right now, a lot of customers are actually asking for copyright information, license information, that kind of stuff. And with that tool, you can actually get this information from public libraries. And I can only tell you guys from the point of view of an IC working with the available tools that we are using. So the service that we have, which is constructing these SBOMs, is based on Golang. So obviously we're using the for CycloneDX the Golang library, which I think is amazing. Also the CycloneDX specification, I think, is easy to grok. And I point that out because I feel that with SPDX, it is a bit different. So there is also tooling available for SPDX, but I feel that it's not as good, as well maintained as the CycloneDX stuff. So kudos to the maintainers of all the CycloneDX tools. But then also what I found was that the specification of SPDX is actually hard to understand sometimes, or to give some good guidance on how you should be actually constructing your SBOMs in that schema. So an example would be, for example, to describe the relationships between your components. There seem to be like different ways of actually saying package A depends on package B. You can also say package B is a dependency of package A. So that's like just a simple example, but it goes to show that actually you as somebody who implements this, you are faced with the questions like, okay, do I actually choose option A? Do I choose option B? And I think with Cyclone DX, you don't really have that much guesswork. And I mentioned this enrichment util that we have open sourced. Again, we are facing some challenges there with SPDX, where we get some data from ecosystems, if you know that. You're probably also familiar with deps.dev that's been making the rounds lately. We're integrating with that, but ecosystems is very similar. You just give it package coordinates and it's giving you back a lot of rich metadata about that package. And I have been working on the extension of our tool to actually consume that data, put that into SPDX. And a lot of the fields, I find that I cannot really find the right definition in the SPDX specification, if that makes sense. So I actually then have to reach out to people who have been minting the specification, ask like how is this supposed to be used? Am I actually doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? So on the one hand, I feel that there is a little bit of a lack of enablement, where it's not necessarily clear from the content that you have available to you as an engineer, like what choices do you actually make when you implement your code. That's one thing. And another thing escaped my mind now. Yeah, I'm maybe gonna stop right here. So I'm basically freestyling this, as you guys can tell. Like I've been asked to I've been asked to join this call this morning and didn't have much time to prepare. But is this actually relevant context for you guys?
Yeah, I find this fascinating. And shame on Dan for not giving you more warning. He's known about this for like, what, 4 weeks almost, I think?
No, he did ask me last week, but I was out sick last week, and then I jumped, or it was the week before, I think, and then so I jumped on this call. But yeah, no, it's actually not on Dan, it's more on me. So I take all the blame here.
Ryan, just jump in. You don't need to raise your hand.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So great to hear what's going on at SNCMAX. I've actually used SNCC quite a bit and think it's a great tool. You mentioned the idea of scanning SBOMs to determine what kind of vulnerabilities are in there. Are you doing anything in regards to being able to grok backports of patches to fix security issues in previous versions?
If it's about consuming a VEX file, for example, or maybe ignoring certain issues, then yes, that's actually built into SNCC already. And we are planning to actually offer an API where you can upload your SBOM, including some directives of like the issues that you don't really want to care about. But that's all in the making currently. So I can't disclose too many details about that, but yes, that's
understood.
That's actually at the heart of our product, is that you also you don't want to produce too much noise, because we appreciate that this is mostly going to be interesting for CISOs or IT folks who actually want to understand what's in the software they're using, and maybe then also monitor for it. So I see that we're doing something similar in the vein of Guac or dependency track, if you're familiar with those tools. So you actually upload your SBOM and you keep monitoring, like, is there a new vulnerability that is being disclosed? And sure. Yeah, so ignoring some of them and saying like, well, that's not actually exploitable in our case. That's actually something we have as a base requirement to this feature.
Okay. Yeah, because some of what we're doing at Intel is, for example, we have an internal curated version of OpenSSL where we support the versions released over the last 2 years, and we've backported all of the fixes into those. So we're trying to make sure that, for us, we'd love to have solutions that don't ding us, for shipping older versions that would seem to have vulnerabilities because of their version number.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions? All right, Max, you're free. That was awesome. Well done.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. That was really cool. All right, Matt, you are next on the agenda.
Thank you. Let me share, hopefully. Was that successful? Okay,
It
so
is.
on the last call, I was actually pleased and shocked that we had a couple of presenters present early work on creating build bombs and their experiences. And I was like, I need to inform this group what's going on in terms of Cyclone DX. So in terms of Cyclone DX, there's multiple work streams that SBOM complexity is going up. Formulation is one of the things I took under my belt, but I also participated in the machine learning work group as well as the attestation work group. Lots of new complexity is coming in. So fundamentally, I work for IBM, and I've been trying to figure out how we create SBOMs for many years now, and to satisfy the different requirements coming at us from the ground up, from creating very controlled build systems to get SALSA level 3 type attestations, reproducible build type stuff into an SBOM. I've got machine learning AI stuff I want to associate with an SBOM, and I kept telling the Cyclone DX community from the industry work group, I've got tons of data from lots of different perspectives. I need a framework in terms of SBOM and a logical place to put the data, a context, if you will. And so this formulation work came up. I found out about it last fall, and I ended up volunteering use cases. And they said, hey, why don't you take a stab at writing a proposal for the schema, which I did. And so Cyclone DX 1.5, I just did a 2-hour, the RFC went out early May. I did a 2-hour review with a small group of people going through all the RFC comments that came up during the review period. But this work I'm describing is work that's going in Cyclone DX 1.5, which will be GA later this week or early next week. So again, I have tons of data, and I have SALSA data, attestations, I've got evidence, I've got information from GitHub, I got tons of things, and many things we build with Tekton. So I needed a way to capture the build pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline, if you will. And of course, I've been a follower of Fresca since the beginning, because I'm a big Tekton fan since it was part of Knative build. And its ability to perhaps create the attestations and actually capture them. But also capture the runtime stack below it. So how do I capture Tekton triggers, pipelines, tasks, Kubernetes, maybe Kata container runtimes, Kubernetes below it, all its configurations down to hardware, because we have federal customers that need SBOMs that have the entire runtime stack inclusive. So, we have a lot of complexity. So typically a CI/CD pipeline concept is common. Travis, Jenkins have these concepts. Tekton's kind of taken to the next degree. So I'm trying to show tech. So you basically have triggers, you have events that trigger the pipeline. So you can grab the source code, you can grab the people and events and things that actually trigger the build in an automated fashion. You have a series of tasks that are conditionally executed that typically are run as containers. You have workspaces that are shared, and each of them passes out outputs and inputs to downstream tasks. And of course, it's not pictured here, there are evidence lockers and things that produce not just logs, but actually perhaps SALSA attestations from SigStore, in Total Records, attestation records, etc. But we need a way to capture all these things. And I mentioned the complexity can be quite large. So how do I do this in SBOM when I perhaps have the pipelines are very complex? I'll just give an example. One of our products in IBM has 3 layers of builds to create one product with a total of 400 build steps, 400 tasks. And in addition, they run parallel pipelines at different points to check, to run AI fuzzing, to do, scanning, sniffing, and a whole bunch of things. And if I wanted to show everything that I did, my due diligence, to build that one product out of 2,200 products that we actively produce, how do I give that to a federal customer? How do I do that within the context of Cyclone DX? So here's what I'll show you. Pictures worth 1,000 words. So basically there's this, didn't want to do that. Let's see. The bar is coming up, I think. So here's the schema in a nutshell. So I thought you show you the schema. Let me zoom in a little bit. So just give you a flavor for what's going to Cyclone DX. So in the top of an SBOM, you'll have this new thing called formula. So you can actually provide your build formulas in the form of workflows. So you basically, within the formula, you can define components, tools, services that took part or participated in the CI/CD process to build, scan, anything that touched your build or was part of a task. You can bring in the components and describe them. And if you're familiar with Cyclone DX, these are parallel, but these are separate from the components and services that are part of the actual subject of the build. These are actually the things, the components or resources that participated in creating the subject component. So in terms of workflows, again, you'll see a lot of Tecton or Jenkins familiar semantics. So workflows are actually tasks themselves. So it's kind of an inheritance model. Workflows are comprised of a series of tasks, and there's task dependencies. There's a graph that maintains the graph between the dependencies, and there's a set of workspaces that are defined that are shared workspaces between the tasks. And of course, that there's a trigger. And the trigger there's events and things that cause the trigger to activate to cause the build to happen. And you basically have time stamping for every workflow and for each task. You can see, again, workspaces is exciting. You can see you can describe the volumes and you can describe how they were mounted and all sorts of things if you want to do those things. In terms of task dependency or tasks themselves, we can look in those. You'll see a lot of duplication. But you have different task types you can describe using tagging mechanisms, what your task was doing. So you can do searches on your workflow, basically, to determine which tasks were doing certain activities. Say, did you do a scan? Did you do this? Where did you do that? You can actually dive into the SBOM and do type of XPath type queries or JSON jQuery mechanisms into the final SBOM to figure out where those tasks lived and what things they touched and what they did. In terms of, you also have things like steps. So you have your trigger definition, what triggered the task. So every task gets triggered. There's conditions to trigger the task, since there's conditional logic in the pipelines. So you can actually describe the events and the conditions that existed. This is much like a policy enforcement point. If you're familiar with general security policy enforcement, you can describe those things here, etc. So just try, I mean, I'm somewhat trying to blow you away, but basically this is what you need for SALSA level 3+ compliance. And this is the framework that we designed to hang the data. So to make it real, let me make it real. I haven't done a lot of work with this since mid-May, but I promised to write a guide on how to do this in Cyclone DX. So I took a basic Tecton build of an application, which is a Java Spring Boot application, and it's comprised of a pipeline that builds the application. In terms of, there's an event, a developer does a push to a repo, perhaps if this is a release or just normal developer push to and you basically can kick off a pipeline that fetches the repo, and GitHub provides a webhook to do that. And you can actually build, fetch the repo. You can actually do a Maven build on it. You can use Builda to build the application into a container image. You can actually, this application actually does use kubectl to actually deploy it to a running Kubernetes instance. So it does a live update of the application as it's built. And this is true cloud native. This is true cloud native continuous delivery, right? So how do we do that? How do we represent these things in like a Cyclone DX workflow? So in general, conceptually, you'll see the concept of, you'll have a formula, you'll have components and services, you have a workflow. In this case, we're describing one contiguous workflow. It's made up of a bunch of tasks, and you can list the tasks, A, B, C, D here, and dependency graph. So let me show you how we do it. So here's the subject to build. This is the Spring Boot application. So it's the metadata, it's the component we're building. We describe that. In terms of formulation data, we have to describe the Tecton resources. So, we talked about Istio. So everything Kubernetes has basically resource definitions, how you declare them. You have pipeline run, task runtime, and trigger runtime components. You have to describe all these things. You have moving parts that take place in the pipeline, and basically how you map these things to the schema. So in terms of formula, so for example, you have components. So in terms of Kubernetes Tecton, you basically have these tasks. For example, you have Well, you have a pipeline itself, which does the clone, build, push, deploy pipeline. And you have an event listener. So this is the event that GitHub provides that is our webhook, basically, that triggered the pipeline. We have a trigger template. Here's a trigger that receives the event, decides whether to kick off the thing, kick off the CI pipeline. We have a pervasive volume claim. So basically our workspaces are backed by PVCs or actual volumes. And we have things like the tasks. We have a get clone task, we have a Maven task, we have a build a task. So we can define these components in the context of the formula. In terms of runtime components, you can see an example of the actual stack. So Kubernetes itself, you can actually have an entry in the component saying it was built on Kubernetes, and you can describe the component, the Kubernetes component, where you grabbed it from. So in this case, there's many places that you can install Kubernetes from. So I picked this one from Google. So basically, pulls the code down. And you also, in terms of Tekton, you need to pull down 2 parts of Tekton to build it. You need the pipeline stuff itself, which is inclusive of tasks, as well as the triggers. So you have to define Tekton, your Tekton component. You define your Tekton triggers as well. And where you got it from, I got the containers from Google Storage, from Tekton releases. And I have my Tekton tasks themselves that I can describe. So you can define all these things in terms of a workflow. And here's the trigger, for example. I can describe the trigger itself. And these include input parameters, output parameters. They include attestations on and evidence. You can describe any type of inputs to a black box task and in the outputs. And you can actually point to them either if they're in your SBOM, you can point to them externally, or you can actually point them as a BOM link. So if you have another BOM that describes a component, you don't have to inline it. You can actually say, here's the BOM for Kubernetes, here's the BOM for whatever, and just point to it. So I don't know how deep I should go for the audience here, but I'm just trying to say that the goal here was to try and show you that that BOMs, many people, in the open source are in the stage of like, let's just get a BOM created. But in terms of, where we're headed with government and with even the recent ransomware that things happened over the last weekend that I saw lots of talk shows on, the federal government and financial institutions, because a lot of our products are built on open source, Kubernetes, Tekton, Istio, we use the mesh stuff, we use Kubeflow for building our AI models, et cetera. It's all open source. That we're gonna, the people who use it, either they're gonna fork it and create that themselves, or the open source projects themselves have to start creating this type of data. And I'm just happy that generationally, as SPDX 3.0 with a security profile has some footprints for this with built BBOM, and that regardless if you're doing hardware, building hardware or AI models, or SBOMs, any type of manufacturing BOM, that you can capture your entire SALSA 3 compliant workflow in CycloneDX 1.5 very soon. Because now I can go back to my internal customers and say, you have all this data, I can tell you exactly where to put it in the context of your build and all the tasks. So each task that produces evidence can actually annotate that I produced the attestation, and I can point to SigStore and the transparency logs and things like that from SigStore, et cetera. So I'll stop, and it's a fire hose, and there's a lot here, but I just wanted to raise awareness to be informative. Again, we're a lot of the guide, hopefully will come out hopefully by end of July. This is one of the examples I'm working on, but you can actually represent a simple makefile, a manual makefile build where your event is just a person and kicking off a makefile and those type of things. And it can do complex data models. You can actually record the workflow for how you trained your model data, what prompts you use, and the same framework could be just describe all those things. And as we go forward, machine learning with ChatGPT and the uproar around generative transformer models and things like that, and foundation models that are coming out in mass, there'll be more and more data, and we need a logical framework to hang the data and be inclusive in the overall process. More and more applications will ship with AI, so you need to describe not just the files that for the build, you need to describe the models as well. So this gives you the framework. So I'll stop there.
Holy crap, man! Like,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
That's
agreed.
a lot. I guess the only question I have when I see all this is, are you working to like incorporate much of this into Fresca? Because I have a suspicion this is well outside the skill set or ability for many, many projects to do.
Well, yeah, that's Tecton change was my great hope, and that's why I mentioned it in my onset. Is I followed Tecton since it was in Knative, and when Tecton, I saw Fresca, I was all over. I attended every work group that I could when meetings from the small team of developers. But and Fresca, maintains that I was hopeful that Tecton and the chains work in Salt their goal was to produce salsa attestations. So it's all inclusive of that. This design, first and foremost, as my top level use case, was to include Fresca. But there's different viewpoints. So let me give you an example. So that's Fresca is the Tecton viewpoint. So that's your workflow runtime. So it has a view, it has this attestation, it only has a certain view. It knows what comes into the pipeline and perhaps what was produced by tasks in the pipeline, but it doesn't know what goes before. And this is the same problem with Salsa, with Salsa source stuff. So in terms of IBM, our Tecton, our Fresca runs on something called tool chains. And tool chains runs on different hardware and software environments. It runs on ZOS, it runs on different power environments, and it runs on bare metal. And it also instead of using ephemeral keys like Spire keys that Fresca uses, it uses hardware keys or KMS keys if you use a cloud provider. So you need to be able to capture things that are outside the scope of Tecton, and you can do those things as well in terms of a general workflow.
Awesome. Anyone have any questions for Matt? That was a lot to take in. I think it'll be a couple days before I have any questions.
Yeah, but I'm at the same point. I mean, if you're aware, I created an SBOM utility, which I support validating SPDX and Cyclone both, as well as I added some diff capabilities and some other things, vulnerability capabilities. And I do a lot more other things. And I wasn't creating an SBOM. So a couple months ago, I decided to grab, I think, our SNCC friend was mentioning the one I grabbed for Golang. It was a plugin I created a GitHub action. I'm generating some very basic, Cyclone DXS bombs for my own utility, but they're still very rudimentary. In terms of tooling, it's all about making sure the tools operate together. All the tools operate in tandem. So you can't just create one utility rule them all for all languages, even in the old days. And going forward, you'll have different types of bombs, build bombs, M bombs, whatever types of bombs you might have, that the tools all have to understand how they work in a tool chain together against the same data set. And the most important thing, like I said, is this framework. If I have data that's coming in from different views, from different tools, I need to know where to put my data in context, right? And that's why this formulation and build bomb stuff is really important.
All right. Anything else from anybody? From Matt? All right. We don't have enough time to cover anything else. So how about we all bail and do something for 10 minutes before our next meeting? Thank you everyone for presenting today. This was like an amazing fire hose of information, and I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, great information from everyone.
Yep. Until next time.
Thank you.
All right.